Hey everyone, my name is Deb Kelsbeek with FemPro Business Society, and today we are meeting with Rebecca. So we're going to be going through some questions that were submitted to us, and we're going to keep them in the I statement so that we are able to make them more relatable and applicable. So Rebecca, I'm going to have you go and introduce yourself.
Okay, so I'm Rebecca Thomas. I'm the EnerChi architect, more than a life coach, and I coach here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but I actually coach internationally. I'm just based here, and I am here today to help us sort through like some of those things that are challenging us, not only in our personal lives, but our professional lives. So,
Would you know that there's a lot of challenges going on right now? So
yep.
we definitely have a lot of questions to get through, so I want to go ahead and hop right into those. Sound good?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so the first question that we have is, how can I navigate the overabundance of resources right now? Everyone has resorted to moving their business online, which means we have even more events and posts and Zoom meetings. Like everything is just coming at us.
Mm-hmm. So my biggest thing with that is, first of all, like to realize you don't have to do everything. I think we're kind of built as a society to think that we have to do all the things, and that's a really unsustainable track to be on. So just giving yourself permission to not participate in everything or not explore all of the resources. I think something that can be really, really helpful is to, like for resources, for instance, is to just pick one. So when it comes to all of the things that we're dealing with and all of the resources and all of the meetings and all the changes, that can be so overwhelming. And I think one of the easiest ways to start sorting through that is, first of all, to give yourself permission to not do all the things. Especially being bombarded with new information and new ways of doing things, it's easy to get swept up into feeling like you have to explore all of them. So I would suggest giving yourself permission to not do all of them, but then to also just pick one. And it doesn't have to be the right one, but just giving yourself permission to pick one thing. And once you start using that or exploring that or doing that, you should feel a little clarity around whether it's something that's on the right path for what you need to do, whether that is, if you're doing mandatory work meetings, that's one thing. But if you're trying to find like social hours that are online, that are virtual, or if you're being invited to extra trainings or events, just picking one and giving yourself permission to explore that, feel whether or not it does feel right for you. And if it does, then go with it. And if it doesn't, then let it go and maybe not even replace it with anything, or find something different that brings a better energy. And with resources too, like pick one thing. Like I remember we had a friend that was talking about how she was being bombarded with different social media outlets where everybody's trying to connect right now. And we shouldn't feel like we're trying to deal with enough right now. We shouldn't feel obligated to explore all those things. So same thing, like pick one, see if it works for you. Or you can also just reach out to 2 or 3 friends that you trust and have like this good understanding of who you are, and say, hey, which one would you use and why? And then just use it. And if it doesn't work for you, then let it go. Like it's not that serious. Just let it go. Don't obsess and don't get frustrated over trying to figure all of these things out, because that's a pressure that we don't need right now.
Absolutely. It's almost like we had this FOMO of missing out
Mm-hmm.
before this stay in place order, and now it's still a little bit of a FOMO
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to all these things, where it's like you don't want to miss out, but at the same time, like your energy is just not there.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I'm curious. So this next question is, do you think business owners have to feel obligated to move into the online space, even if it wears them down and they don't enjoy it?
So I think with that, I think we need to remove the obligation, like just because there is so much pressure behind us when we word it like that, or when we feel like that. So instead of feeling obligated, focus on, um, focus on what you can and can't control and what is and isn't necessary for you. Obviously, a lot of things are shifting to online more than ever, and that's going to be a necessary space, but we don't have to learn everything all at once, and we can lean on other people. I think a lot of times when it comes to stuff like this, especially if you're starting up as an entrepreneur, that we forget that we can reach out and find mentors and supporters and resources to help us through those spaces instead of feeling like we have to do it all ourselves, because we just get stuck there like, oh, I should know how to do all the things, when in reality, if you reach out and ask for help and support in places where you might not really understand or actually have some personal resistance to, then you're more liable to move forward into it instead of just staying there and kind of treading water.
Absolutely. So what if I don't know where to turn to next? Like if my business can't pivot and I just kind of feel stuck, how can I kind of navigate those feelings?
So first of all, I always say feel all your feelings. Don't judge yourself over them. Give yourself a ton of grace. Get curious around like why you feel that way. Sometimes journaling helps with that, like because if you don't have an awareness of why you feel certain ways, then you don't really know what to do with it. And prime examples, like last week, Tuesday, I had like not the worst day ever, but it was a really, really hard, heavy day, and I couldn't figure out why. And I'm usually pretty good at not only having awareness, but shifting out of things. And I reached out to a friend and had an amazing conversation with her. And in doing so, starting having this realization that I was actually grieving the loss of connection. And so as soon as I realized that, and some of the coaching that I do actually centers around grieving, and I have my own experiences with that. So I as soon as I realized like, oh, that's what this is, I could shift out of it. So just building awareness. Why do you feel how you feel? And maybe journaling and seeing if there's anything triggering that, but also like letting yourself feel that and not beating yourself up over it. But also, I feel like most businesses, there is a way to pivot. It just might be a blind spot for you, like whether you can think creatively or have enough awareness or even have the emotional capacity to say, okay, this is how I can shift. If you don't, I would suggest finding national groups. Like there's a lot of amazing groups on Facebook where you can plug into in their national spaces and start asking questions like, hey, this is what I do. This is what I'm running up against right now. What would you do? And you're going to get so many different perspectives, and you never know which one's going to be the one that's like, oh, I could do that. And then you could start working towards that. So I think that's an amazing way to, kind of get outside of the capacity that you have to do it yourself, and also find other information and address your blind spots at the same time.
That's such good advice to like just reach out and ask others for help, because it's so much of the time that it's a blind spot that we don't see that someone else may be able to help us with. So the next one is, what if I want to turn my side hustle into a full-time business?
Right. So this is something that I actually did last year. And I know there's a lot of people that have been like, that's been on their radar over the last couple of years. And I think this is the perfect time right now to do that, because like we're really breaking everything down to like ground zero when it comes to our emotional capacity and like what our purpose is, what our passion is, what's most important. Like all of those things are really coming to light right now with what we're experiencing. So there's a couple of different things I would say take the time and the opportunity to start plugging into your passion more, your side hustle more, and building that right now. There's a ton of free resources right now because there's so many companies that are realizing this is an opportunity to not only get lifetime customers, but they're also trying to accommodate us during a time when everything isn't as accessible financially and physically. So it's a perfect time to find those resources too and start plugging into that. And another thing is like with the connection and the resources, going back to like that national space, people want to be valuable all the time, but it's especially so right now. So asking for help, asking how people would do it, like more people want to help and provide value right now because we're lacking that face-to-face connection. So that's another way that we could build that. But a key thing in doing all of this is to always keep track of what is the reality. Like when I ended up shifting from my salary work from home position last year, I quit cold turkey and went straight into doing what I'm doing now. And it was amazing, and I wouldn't change a thing. And that's how I function best. But there's definitely been some eye-opening moments where it was like I wasn't making decisions based on what my current reality was. And that kind of messed up my track and my progress. So always paying attention to like, okay, what do I need right now to be okay? Especially when we're talking about finances and emotions. And then what am I working towards, and continuing to work towards that, and to just take small incremental steps every single day, not to overwhelm ourselves with like having to create whole systems and processes, but just like doing a little bit every single day to work towards that thing.
So one thing that I think we've all kind of been feeling within all this, number one, all the emotions. But the way that each day just feels so different. It's like this super weird dream where some days we're like super up and like, yeah, I got this, we can do this. Whereas the next day it's like low, hopeless, just this array of emotions. So the question is this normal, and how can I cope?
So first of all, I think we should all throw the word normal out the window right now. That's like saying consistent weather in Michigan. Like, it just does not apply right now, or generally it doesn't really apply. We just have a different understanding and footing in it. So throw the word normal out and replace it with valid. Is it valid? Ooh. Absolutely. Like, everything that we're feeling right now and working through is absolutely valid. And there's no need to compare like how we're doing to somebody else, how we're doing today versus yesterday. Like, even those kinds of judgments are going to throw us off track. And instead focus on just feeling your feelings again, making sure that you're feeling everything that you need to, and giving yourself some grace and saying it's okay to feel this way. But then journaling again would be another good thing to refer back to, creating that awareness. Okay, is there anything that's bringing up these feelings for you? Like, I know a lot of times when I get frustrated or angry or even just feel heavy, it's because I feel disempowered about something. So my first reaction, and something I've learned about my own self over the years, is when I start feeling that way, is to start looking into how to empower myself in that area. So if I feel this way, I would Google it, and I would find all the resources and focus on what I can fix myself. And that always makes me feel at least a little better, if not a lot better, because it starts giving you your power back and also gives you the tools to shift that. So journaling, getting awareness around how you're feeling, and then just looking for the tools that can help you shift out of that feeling, but also giving yourself the grace to feel the feelings and not judging yourself over it.
I like that. Feel the feelings.
Feel the feelings.
So this one's going to be pretty similar, but I believe what this question is more of asking is the steps. So kind of, even you just gave us some suggestions on steps of what to do. But through this whole thing, I just feel like I'm kind of living this fog that like I can't really lift. Do you have any suggestions on how to start coming out of that?
I would still, again, go back to the journaling, because it is awareness that's going to bring you to a space where you can move through it, not fix it, but move through it. So how are you going to get from point A to point B? Why do I feel this way? How do I feel? Like, can you even name the feeling that it is? Like last week when I said I was having that bad day on Tuesday, all I knew at the time is that it felt heavy and it felt gross, and it didn't quite feel like depression, but it felt a little bit like that kind of feeling. And as soon as I figured out that it was grief that I was feeling, I knew how to move through it. So like journaling and figuring out how you feel first off, but then being able to move through that. And it's going to happen, it's going to be different for everybody, because we have so many different dynamics from household to household. So another thing that fog might be resulting from might be from boundaries. Like, if you're focusing too much on social media, if you're focusing too much on news, because news can be very disempowering, especially if you're getting lost in it. Are you focusing too much on taking care of everybody else in the house and not yourself? Like, are you making sure that you fill your cup? So if the fog is there, like, try to figure out where that's coming from, and even just experiment with a different couple or different ways to try and shift out of that and see if anything works. And if it works, do more of that.
Yeah, I definitely didn't think of it that way. That's so good about, making sure that your cup is full,
Hmm.
and that it also could be from social media or it could be from the news. Um, that's such good insight. So, what if I don't know what I want to do when I go back? Because that one's going
Hmm.
to be, and I totally understand this question because so many people right now are enjoying this time being
Hmm.
home, and they feel like they were kind of in burnout before, whereas right now they feel like they are like able to be a healthy whole person, just one that's stuck in the house. And so when
Hmm.
we go back to that work schedule, it's going to feel different. And I feel like many of us aren't going to 100% know how to navigate those boundaries of like
Hmm.
maybe working less or maybe needing a change in our careers. But the question in general that was asked is,
Hmm.
what if I don't know what I want when I go back?
Right. And this is one of the reasons that I'm super excited about this time, despite everything that's going on that could be seen as negative. This is like I was saying before, something where everything is really scaling back, and we're becoming incredibly aware of like what's actually important. And a lot of the people that I work with, that's one of the things they struggle with the most. Like they don't feel like they have purpose, and they don't feel like their life is fulfilling. It's because they aren't doing and living intentionally. So when we really look at what is it that we want to do, well, you also have to figure out what you don't want to do. So what doesn't feel right, and just having clarity around like what your core values are, what the things are that are most important to you. Making sure that you have emotional goals is really, really key to making sure that you're hitting things on your purpose and passion path. And just exploring how things could actually look. I think that this time is actually giving people a better picture of like how things could actually look. And moving forward, I think that we have to have the foresight, but also the be brave enough to ask for things in a way that we want them. So like you were saying, working from home more, how many hours we want to work, or even shifting into an incredibly different path, a different career. What do you actually want, and not sitting back and just letting life happen because that's the normal, standard, like setting new standards for ourselves and giving ourselves permission to do that. Because I feel like this is definitely going to create a huge shift in people realizing, I don't want to go back to that job. And again, we have to still like function from our current reality, but that doesn't mean we can't work towards a new one too.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can I better manage my expectations when my typical
Let
measuring
go of
of
them.
what's that?
I said, let go of them.
Those expectations. But my typical measuring of being productive no longer applies. Just
Hmm.
let go of it.
I like seriously, letting go of expectations is one of the things in all areas of my life that has propelled me forward, because that doesn't mean that you don't have a focus and a goal, but it does mean that when you let go of what the expectation looks like, you can still put the energy and the work towards what you want, but you're not stuck in the disappointment or frozen because you're not getting it how you thought it should look, because we don't always know what that's going to look like. So I think that letting go of expectations is really key, but still keeping the focus and the clarity of what you actually want. And I think this plays a lot into like when we're talking about what our expectations are, especially measuring production. That's a hard one right now, because the concept of time as we knew it doesn't exist right now. So let's just get real about that and let go of that, because that's another thing I was struggling with last week personally too. And so when you think about that, like, how do you measure productivity? How do you measure progress? And one of the things that I know works is looking back at times where maybe over a short period of time, you didn't see the progress. But when you can look over a longer period of time, like let's say you look at 1 month last year, early last year, and you didn't have the capacity to realize like how much traction you were actually making. But then when you look over the course of the entire year, you can probably track some progress there, and you can probably have some pride and some awareness around like the things that actually shifted because you kept taking those small consistent steps every day. So really focusing on that can put you back in that power mode, empower yourself again, but also replicating that, like still plant. I always say planting the seeds. You just keep planting the seeds. And even though they might not come to fruition like they used to right now, that doesn't mean they won't after the fact. So sometimes there's just a pause. I mean, when you think about, of all things, Michigan weather and how our crops are affected by that, there's some seasons where things just get pushed back and sometimes where the entire season's eradicated. So looking at it like that and just doing what you can, but not feeling responsible to control all of it, because you can't control all of it, but just measuring what you can. So when you look at statistics, like if you're having a hard time measuring progress or measuring your productivity, is there anything you can keep track of that you can feel like when you look at it at the end of a day, I was productive for this long, or this is what shows me how productive I was? Or if I look at my financial numbers, will that tell me something? Does that help me make me feel better? If I look at the number of followers I have, or how many communications I have, or how many clients I'm picking up, those are things we can still look at. And it might not measure the entire picture for us, but it could at least give us some insight on what our progress is. So just focus on the things that you can measure and then decide, like, what makes me feel productive, what kind of day feels productive, and do more of that.
That is such good insight. So I do have one more question, and it's not even one that anyone submitted to us. It's actually one that I've been hearing from other business owners.
Okay.
And that is guilt. So there's two sides to this. One of like, I feel guilty because even though I am out of work right now, but I see this as being a positive, whereas maybe others in the industry are like feeling broken right now. And because I don't feel broken myself, and I think that can actually be a good thing, there's guilt of not feeling broken. And then there's the other half where they're like, actually, I am still either working or my business is absolutely thriving right now. And they feel guilt because others in their industry or close to the industry, people that they know are out of work. And once again, feeling that brokenness right now.
Yeah, that second piece, actually, I've been coining that thriver's guilt, because I'm sure we've all heard of survivor's guilt in an aspect, but this is like thriver's guilt. And I think we need to remember, going back to that piece, where whatever we're feeling, it is valid from person to person, day to day, moment to moment. All the things that we're feeling and experiencing are valid and they're personal to us. We all have our own unique set of circumstances. So just remembering that and having empathy, not only with others is always key, but also with ourselves. Like not comparing ourselves, whether we're doing better or worse, according to who, like that's for us to decide. So not making that comparison and having empathy with ourselves and realizing that whatever we are feeling, whether it's positive or negative, that it is valid, not only for us and for everybody else. And I mean, if we really want to get real about it, a lot of that judgment comes in wondering like what somebody else would think of us. Can we admit right now that we're all pretty well personally absorbed in what's going on in our own lives and not worrying about like the neighbor or the friend across town or even somebody we know across the country? It doesn't mean we don't think about them, but when it comes to what our main focus is right now, it's ourselves. So whatever you're feeling is valid, and just have empathy and don't compare. It's not a time for comparing. If you're doing good, focus more on that. If you can use the good to help other people and you have the capacity to do that, go ahead and do that. If you're struggling, it's okay. And if you need to reach out, like I would encourage people to reach out, because a lot of times when we're struggling, like we get stuck in just feeling isolated, which is super easy right now, and feeling alone. So like when we start hearing those Me Too's and getting those empathy pieces from other people, that can help us bring us back to like, oh, this is normal, first off, but I'm also not the only one experiencing it.
This has all been so good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was our last question that was submitted.
Okay.
Is there any last words of encouragement or things that you would suggest people to maybe, consider working on while they're in this season?
I think more than anything, more than anything, just remember everything that we're feeling on a personal level, whenever we feel it is valid. Have empathy with yourself. And I think one thing that I'm not sure how comfortable a lot of people are doing this, but meditation is really, really good for all of us. Not only does it allow us to connect to ourselves and kind of remove our personal identity from everything, but it also really helps the brain feel a lot safer and helps everything slow down and get back in the moment instead of worrying about whatever happened to the past or what's going to happen moving forward. So I would really suggest that people just incorporate a very simple 10-minute meditation every day just to help them center themselves and feel that peace of, okay, it's going to be okay, and just slowing everything down so that fight or flight isn't sitting there waiting for something to happen so that it can react.
And that's one thing I know personally I
Mm-hmm.
need to incorporate back into my life, because I noticed that
Mm-hmm.
when I was meditating more often, I just
Mm-hmm.
felt way more level-headed and just peace in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then that also goes along with, I was doing yoga at the time, and so the two kind of
Yeah.
went hand in hand. I need to make that more of a practice.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Well, what's up?
nothing.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to let you go here, but thank you so much for just sharing your wisdom and your time with us. We truly appreciate you. All
Always. Thanks for your time too, lady.
right. Bye.
Bye.